Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you don't know who I am, my name is Allison and this is the Devotional Hearts Show. And this is my 29th episode. I'm very happy to report that these episodes are now available on podcast, on Spotify and Google Podcasts and iTunes pretty soon. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at A Devotional Heart. And I have a Telegram group for women interested in Orthodoxy. And today I have a special guest who I met on Instagram. I know his housemate, Amy, who was my guest recently on my show, and his fiance, Julie, is an upcoming guest. So Jacob, thank you so much for agreeing to be on my show, and just want to welcome you and thank you so much for being here.
Well, Allison, thank you for having me on. I'm excited about what you're doing with this show and happy to be part of it.
Awesome. So I've watched a couple of your videos on YouTube, and I'm particularly interested in your experiences with Burning Man. And you have done a really good job of comparing your trip to an Orthodox monastery with going to Burning Man. And so I'm going to put the link to that particular video in the description for my audience to watch because it's really well done. And I just wondered if today during our discussion, you could maybe bring in a couple of the points that you made in that video because it's so good. But first, I would love for you to tell us your story, how you discovered Orthodoxy, or, what kind of spirituality you were interested in before you became Orthodox. So just feel free to start from any age, any part of your life. This is all going to be pretty new to me. So I'm looking forward to learning about your story.
Yeah, it sounds good. And I appreciate the opportunity to tell my story because it's been very interesting to me. And I think it resonates with a lot of other people, but it's hard to find the right place to be able to talk about it. So I do appreciate that. And I mean, as you can tell from my Burning Man video, I kind of come most recently out of this hippie Eastern religion, meditation, Buddhist kind of psychedelic world. That was what I was into immediately before I encountered Orthodoxy, and sort of I made that video kind of early in my journey coming out of the neo-hippie world, let's say, and into Orthodoxy. And it's interesting because I think that I might be too embarrassed to make that today. Maybe my hippie self feels too far in the rear view, and my Orthodox identity feels too central for me to want to dwell on my past. But I think that can be often create a barrier to newcomers when we pretend that we've always been mainstream square Christians that hew to the center line, when actually for me my journey was all over the place before I came to Christianity. So I want to be honest. I don't want to take down my own old videos. I want people to see my process of approaching Christ. And also, I just want to say it's exciting to be here because I think your channel is about sort of the same things I'm excited about, which is I think there's two sort of exciting trends in the world. It's easy to dwell on what's bad in the world and to feel this feeling of heaviness and darkness with the moral decay of the world or the advancement of technology and how that opens up a can of worms. But there are people, smart, inquisitive people encountering Christ. That's sort of a counter trend from what we might have seen 20 years ago. Yeah. When I was a young man, the new atheists were big. People were leaving religion in droves, and it was very popular to make fun of it. And now we see thoughtful people coming back. Not everyone, but some. And I think that's very exciting. And I'm one of those, and I like to tell that story. And the other thing I think, which is somewhat more narrow, is just particularly people coming out of Eastern religion and psychedelia to orthodoxy. Like that is more than just me. That's like a broader trend. And I've been trying to find the right way to speak about that. And I think that's something you've been doing with your channel.
Yeah. A lot of my guests, for my audience, anyone who hasn't watched many of my shows yet, a lot of my guests have come out of psychedelics, Eastern mysticism, myself included. I was a witch and I used many different drugs. We used to call them entheogens because it's about experiencing God through these drugs. That's what we thought we were doing. And so, yeah, Jacob, you're one of many of my guests who I've met in the last 6 or 8 months online who have similar stories. So nobody yet has spoken about Burning Man. So that's going to be fun. But yeah, just so it sounded like were you raised Christian? Did you come from Christian upbringing?
Yeah, I guess we can start from the beginning on that. Life works in funny ways. Like there is a lot of synchronicities and coincidences. I grew up from a very early age. My parents converted to Jehovah's Witnesses, which I can't recommend. It's not a very good religion, but I did learn a lot about the Bible. And so when I think about how everything sort of ties together, like even compared, like I have a fairly good knowledge of the biblical stories. I know where the books are of the Bible. I can flip between them all. Like the interpretive framework I had as a child, I think was very poor and outside the mainstream of Christian history and culture. But I did learn the words of the Bible itself. But Jehovah's Witnesses, first of all, it's very isolating. Like you're not allowed to have friends that are outside their faith. And as a young, curious, smart teenager, I wanted to date and have friends and play sports and run for school president and all this kind of stuff. And the Jehovah's Witnesses would answer, no, 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 no. Like you will only socialize with other Jehovah's Witnesses, and you will not sort of explore your potential in any way that might lead you away from their faith. And so that was very hard and very depressing when I was a teenager. And the other thing that is kind of bad about Jehovah's Witnesses, their theology is very, very unnuanced. It has a lot of hard edges, and it's very easy to find places where it contradicts itself. And if you ask questions, well, they don't like you to ask questions. And I was a smart kid, and I saw all the things that were wrong with it. It didn't take very much work because they're working with a tradition that's like outside the Christian mainstream. It's not an ancient tradition. It's just like some guy that came up with it in the 19th century, like so many American religions.
Yeah.
They predicted the end of the world 3 times in the 20th century. Spoiler alert, didn't happen. It's just not a very smart religion. What they do well is that they hang together and they have a strong, like social, warm, usually social arrangement at church. But that's the flip side, where they threaten people with shunning if they question or don't obey all the rules. So it was like a little totalitarian and a little. I left a really bad taste in my mouth. So when I went to college, of course, I became a rabid atheist and hated religion and rejected all of that. Should I just like speak through the whole thing? There's a lot to go.
Yeah, all of it sounds interesting. So you, instead of looking at other types of Christianity, you just decided there's no such thing as God, and I'm just going to live for myself.
I mean, obviously, right? Like that's the obvious answer.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't everybody think that way? And when you encounter like really dumb religion, like that's like the natural next step. Mm-hmm. A dumb and hurtful religion. Like, to this day, I struggle with just like with who I would have been had I had like normal social experiences as a child.
Yeah.
Or been able to explore my potentials as a child. Like there's a deep pain and sacrifice that I'll never get back. It can't be gotten back. I think some part of me died when I was growing up. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But so of course I went atheist. I read Ayn Rand. I became a libertarian. I flirted with like explicit nihilism for a bit. Like I read Nietzsche. And that, you know, that's kind of where my head was at. And then, but in college, I met people from mainstream Christian religions. I think they were, one grew up Catholic, and I think they were both kind of into like reform stuff, you know, Calvinist stuff. And these were nice guys, and we had debates. And first of all, the first thing I noticed was when I criticized what they believed, that they weren't offended. Like they were down to talk, mm-hmm. which Jehovah's Witnesses were not. Mm-hmm. And the second thing I noticed was, you know, like their beliefs kind of made sense. It wasn't convincing, but I understood how they could believe what they did. Like it hung together. Like it didn't have obvious contradictions. Like if you believe their axioms, which I did not, then it followed. So I gained a little bit more respect for Christianity outside of what I had grown up with. Like that maybe mainstream Christianity was like a little bit better than what I had been raised in. And then I was just a curious kid. You know, I took a class on Buddhism. I learned to meditate. I read a book by the Dalai Lama. I took a secular class on the history of the Bible for one of my like requirements in college. And sort of for the next, I would say 10 years, I was just kind of like in this realm of appreciating spirituality. Like I would even go with my Protestant friends or Catholic friends to the church on Christmas, which, you know, growing up Jehovah's Witness, we weren't allowed to have Christmas. So it felt nice to sort of, as a cultural thing, kind of participate in the holidays of my people or of the world. Mm-hmm. But I'd also go and meditate sometimes, or I'd go to like later when I moved to the Bay, there was like actually some Hindus around. I'd go to a kirtan service or something like that. Like I went to Jewish services. You know, I had a Jewish friend, and I went to a Seder, things like that. Like I wasn't, you know, committing to any particular way, but I did have the feeling when I went to church on Easter and Christmas that like I was a friend of Christ. You know, I'm like, if I knew him, if he knew me, we'd be friends, like from what I knew about him. And I'd say that kind of carried me up through until I got to the Bay. So,
you mean the Bay Area? I just want to.
Yeah, until I got to the Bay Area. And like what really sent me from this like centrist, like a little bit of everything phase to like hardcore Buddhist hippie was probably my encounter with Burning Man. So this brings us to the Burning Man experience.
Okay, what year was that?
That'd be 2012. So for me, I would have been I was probably 29 years old first time I went. Yeah, I had taken a small dose of mushrooms before. So I had some idea like what a psychedelic was. I was very interested in psychedelics for many years before I found someone that actually had some. You know, back in the early 2000s, it wasn't like everyone was doing psychedelics. I don't know anyone at my school even that was really doing it. I knew one kid that smoked weed. Like my college was a little bit more conservative than most, but nowadays I'm sure it's like filthy with mushrooms, right? It's just how things have gone. But back then, yeah, there was no psychedelics at school. Didn't really run into them after school. I finally go up to the Bay to do tech startups, and I get invited by a friend my friend has an extra Burning Man ticket, and I decide to go last minute, and I'm there, and I take a face melting dose of mushrooms. Wow. Which was a very interesting experience. Was
it at night, and then did you like go exploring and looking at all the lights and dancing?
Yeah, I felt really constrained actually by the party aspect of Burning Man. When I took the mushrooms, I was with my friends, and I just wanted to be alone to experience what was happening to me. And so at some point, but I was having a hard time communicating that. And I don't know if they would even let me wander off by myself, because people looking out for people. Your first time taking a big dose of mushrooms, if you're like, I'm going to go off on my own guys, they're going to be like, no. So at some point they're going into some art project. Like there was like a movie theater in the middle of the desert that someone had built. And I just like walked the other way. I didn't want to go in. And I get lost. And I have like this experience where like the world really seems to come alive with entity, with intelligence. Like the moon felt like an entity leading me out into the desert. I close my eyes and I see something sort of out of an Alex Gray painting where I'm suspended over a field of red diamonds with eyes in the middle. And it felt like an entity like holding me and looking after me and telling me everything's going to be okay. And then eventually I wake up with my face in the trash fence that sort of is the boundary of the event. It's like several square miles, and I had wandered all the way without remembering into the trash fence and got caught by it. The purpose of the trash fence is to prevent debris from the event, like from blowing all over the desert. And I guess I was one of those pieces of debris that night. And then it was just a very cathartic experience. Like it felt challenging at times, scary at times, but the next day I just felt very free. I laughed easy. I cried easy. I was like in touch with the beauty of things. When someone told me a story about their lives, like the emotions and what they were saying, like hit my heart. And I had been just grinding on tech startups, and I was an investment banker briefly. And to have my heart open was like this new experience. And that was just very compelling. And so when I got home, I like really embraced like the burner identity and lifestyle, and looked for opportunity to take more psychedelics and like the more traditional sort of undergirding spirituality of that space is more Buddhist and Hindu. So to the extent that I explored more spiritual traditions, it was probably started to become more Buddhist and Hindu at that point. And sort of being this arty experimental psychedelic guy, that I also did a lot of interpersonal relating kind of activities where you would like do eye gazing or and talk about your emotions and things like that, intentional relating. And these kind of things, I was always looking for the next sort of emotional high. Like I wanted these I started chasing peak experiences. And that was kind of who I was for a while. So that was the Burning Man phase.
So you came back and were you experimenting with other things like LSD, ayahuasca, things like that?
Yeah, I've been to ayahuasca journeys. I've been to, I took some LSD. I mean, I could go through the list, but most of the popular party drugs I've tried, not all of them, but 8 out of 10 or something. And I always felt cathartic. A lot of the drugs, especially psilocybin, felt very heart opening. It felt like something that, on one psilocybin trip, I remember just thinking about how much I wanted to tell my dad I loved him. And then like when I finished, like, I called up my dad. I got in touch with my dad in the following months and like had these heart-to-heart conversations with him, especially as he started to get older and started to have more health problems. Like, this rose to the top of mind. So yeah, I would say like that was just kind of the space I was in. It didn't feel entirely bad. But looking back on it now, I think it was just, it only had so far it could go. And I sort of ran into the limits of where that could take me. I had a long-term girlfriend through most of this. And we went to Burning Man together, did art projects together that we brought to Burning Man, made our costumes together, through intentional relating events together, all sorts of things. She was also very into Buddhism and did a 9-month Buddhist retreat once that was partially residential, where she would be home on the weekends, but at the Buddhist retreat during the week. Wow. So we were in all this together, but I had this feeling that I always wanted to have a family, but I was never ready to have one. right? And looking around at who my peers were, like they were all like these man children, of which I was one, where we were all like 30 something and partying and taking drugs and making art and exploring our emotions and practicing how to cry. But nobody was ever ready to have a family.
And polyamory is a big part of that culture too, right?
More now than it was then, but yeah, that was part of it too. And for me, I had a hard time letting go of all the women I hadn't slept with to commit to one woman. And so, you know, she wanted to get married. She wanted to have kids. I wasn't sure if I was ready yet. And keep in mind, I was 35. You know, it's like, I don't know when you're going to be ready, right? And so we go through a messy breakup. And as most people, I think, like emotional distress and suffering often brings us closer to God. Like often you need some catalyst to kick you out of that rut, to get you out and to make you understand that things aren't working and you need to change. And so for me, you know, this woman I was very close with, very intimate with, that things fell apart. And I was kind of looking on my life and I'm like, if I'm going the way I'm going, I'm not going to get what I want. I'm not going to have a family. And like, what was wrong with her? Like, she was perfectly fine woman. And I look at my peers though, and my peers are like polyamorous. They're going to music festivals. They're taking drugs, and they're not doing it either. And I'm like, this whole worldview, it doesn't seem to be getting me what I want. Like the fruit of this tree is not ripe. You know, you'll know a tree by the fruit it bears. The fruit of this tree is not good. In some ways, I think it helped me grow and just like getting closer to my heart. But it didn't give me the structure, the discipline, pointing me in the right direction. So then I think there's a couple of things that happened. One is I started hanging out with other conservative men because politically I lean to the right. And I started hanging out with other conservative men, and we had our regular men's group where we helped each other to orient towards having a family and having our lives together. The other thing, although it wasn't explicitly Christian, the other thing that happened was Jordan Peterson sort of blew up, and I got in contact with him. With his material. I listened to the biblical lecture series, just devoured it, you know, all 36 hours or however many hours it is. You know, I'd always been friendly to Christ. But I think I started to have a bit of a desire to get a little closer. So what happened was
2018, or where are we now in the time frame?
Yeah, we're about 2018. So I did about 6 years in the hippie scene, I would say. Some people learn faster, some people learn slower. What can I say? Better 6 than 16.
We're 30 like me.
Yeah. Well, you know, I saw some guys at Burning Man that were like in their late 40s or 50 and like trying to hit on chicks and like hook up with chicks and stuff. I'm like, it just seems so empty.
Yeah.
It's like, is that what you're doing with your life? It's like, is that who I want to be? Like, you know, if I was looking ahead 15 years, no, it's not who I wanted to be. I did have a friend who did some hippie things. He was at an intentional relating event, and he was an Orthodox Christian. And he told me about a monastery he had been to in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He stayed there 3 months for a school project, and he made a report on that experience. And that sounded really cool to me because I was a Buddhist and I've been to monasteries. I love monasteries. I love going on meditation retreats. And like I always had like this hardcore tilt to my spirituality, where I wanted to really experience things for myself, really see things for myself. And that's part of like what drove me to psychedelics. And part of what I liked about Buddhism was I could get my hands messy. I could experience a reality which was greater than base level reality. Like bourgeois capitalist reality was not enough for me. It's not enough for me to just like get a better car, get a better job, save up money. It's just not enough. I wanted something more, something richer. And so when I heard about this Christian monastery, I'm like, well, if I'm ever in the area, I can check it out. And I did. I went down to Meow Wolf in Santa Fe, which is this like Burning Man art kind of museum in Santa Fe.
Oh yeah, I've seen pictures of it. It's very psychedelic, right? There's like
Very
art and
psychedelic.
lights, and you walk through it and it feels like you're tripping just being in there, right?
It's a wonderful little museum that's like very interactive and kids love it. And my stupid like degenerate friends from the Bay Area like can't go there and enjoy themselves unless they take acid.
Oh,
Like everyone that goes there, like, yeah, I took a tap of acid and went to Meow Wolf. And I'm just like, can you not just like enjoy like what it is? Um, you know, and so I think there is something limiting about it's like ultimately like you should be able to enjoy it, like enjoy the artistry and the interaction without having to take the acid. But yeah, it's very psychedelic and psychedelic friendly. As far as like it mixes well. Although I've never really taken psychedelics in public like that, like so casually, so I can't vouch for that particular experience. But while I was there, I was like, let me check out this monastery. And so I called them up. They were a little skeptical because like I was trying to come in last minute without planning ahead and wasn't Orthodox, wasn't even Christian. But they let me come for a couple of days because I was a friend of someone they knew. So I went out there and it was really lovely. So my first experience really of Orthodoxy was liturgy at 4 a.m., an hour of orthros followed by an hour and a half of liturgy. Somewhat in a cold desert valley out in the mountains. Absolutely beautiful little church, lit entirely by candlelight. And I'm very grateful also it was all in English. So I started to hear the liturgy and that really, to this day, I think probably most of my catechism has come through the words of the liturgical life of the church. So as far as my controversial Orthodox opinions, I am 100% in favor of vernacular language being used in liturgies in most places. And I met the abbot there. I had a talk with him, and he told me, he gave me a couple books to read. One was The Little Prince. He was a big fan of that one. It's a children's book by a French author. It has a lot to do with relationships and emotion, faith, and sort of having one's heart be alive, and holding on to that spirit, I think, of what really matters. Like the Little Prince is sort of contrasted with these adult figures in the book that care about their money or their status and success, versus he's really concerned about his relationships with his little flower or other characters in the book. And the other book he gave me was from Father Sophrony, who at that time had not yet been canonized. He is a modern saint who founded the first Orthodox monastery in England post-schism in Essex. But Father Sophrony left Orthodoxy when he was a teenager and became a Buddhist for a while. He was a Russian who in the early 20th century had, he'd become a Buddhist artist, and then moved to France and to escape the Bolsheviks. And when he was in Paris, he sort of encountered this Orthodox Russian diaspora that called him back to his faith. And then he became a great saint of the church. So I left that monastery with those two books. And when I got back to the Bay, I started having the feeling that I wanted regular spiritual practice in my life. Because I noticed that when I went to a church or went to a meditation event, like it would help calm me down. And I was still dealing with a lot of emotional aftershock of breaking up with a woman that I was so close to for so long. This is the deepest relationship of my life up to that point. And so I went to my friend's Catholic church a little bit. with him. Didn't quite scratch the itch, but it was something. And then I decided to look up the nearest Orthodox church. It was a little dingy Russian church with the faded icons and a low ceiling. And half the liturgy was in Slavonic, which is not something I had any experience of. But I went, and it was pretty good. Like it felt the same spirit of transcendence that I felt at the monastery was there, and it felt nourishing to me. And even though none of my friends were going, and I was the only one that I knew going there, there weren't even that many converts. There was like 5 or 6 converts in a 100-person, 120-person church.
Wow.
It was like, but there was just something, I wanted to be there. It felt good to be there. And even though the liturgy was near 2 hours, like they didn't cut many corners, they're very traditional. This is not like you go to 10 Orthodox churches, and then this is not going to be the grandest one, but it was what I needed at the time. Mm-hmm. And then when I finally opened up this book by Father Sophrony, it's called His Life is Mine. It's a little one, which is cool. That it's so short. Had Jesus on the cover, so I thought it was going to be boring and religious and dry. But like I opened this book up and I started reading, and I was like, this is the most mystical thing I'd ever read. Like this guy was a kindred spirit with me. Like he was really after like what really existed, and he saw Christianity as like a pathway to an encounter with that which really exists. And he like right in the first couple of pages, he talks about how like the name of God is He who is. And I was hooked. I was like, well, this is like not boring and dry at all. This is like the stuff I always wanted to have someone say. But here it is from this Orthodox guy. So that was kind of like brought me into the beginning of the Orthodox phase of my journey, which is I was encountering this church. I was started to imbibe orthodoxy, but I still had a side of myself that was like the burner, the hippie, and that was tense for me. Like I didn't know how this part of myself that was this liberal in lifestyle, if not in politics, but guy could fit into like a very conservative old church. But what I did was I treated it like a relationship. And I was like, well, maybe I don't need to know how it's going to work out at the beginning. I can just like being there. And so I can keep going. And I think that is how I didn't decide what I needed to give up right away. I just kept on staying in relationship with the church because I enjoyed being there. And then I was slowly shaped over time. And even my opinions on a lot of things have changed over time and I've become more conservative and mainstream as an Orthodox. Pardon my cough.
Oh, you're forgiven.
I just got over COVID for those or getting over COVID.
Yeah. What was I going to ask you? Oh yeah. When in this process were you thinking you wanted to be catechized? I mean, were you going to liturgy every Sunday? Was it part of your life, or were you just going when you felt like it and didn't really care about becoming baptized or not?
It's a good question. Like when I was a kid, I hated going to Jehovah's Witness meetings. We had 3 meetings a week plus going door to door. So 4 days a week, we did something with Jehovah's Witnesses. And then we did some study at home outside of that. I hated every minute of it. And there was a lot of minutes. And then I noticed when I started going to an Orthodox church, I wanted to go. Like I missed very few weeks. Like if I missed a week, I felt bad. Like I couldn't wait to get back. I mean, I think I've been exploring Orthodoxy for maybe, I've been baptized nearly 3 years now. And I was, exploring for about a year. I think I've missed in that entire time, like 3 or 4 weeks of liturgy. Wow. And it hasn't been a sense of like guilt or like obligation, but like just desire to be there. So once I started, I really just kept going. And the liturgy does catechize you. Like the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom is the great gift to the Orthodox Church. Like if you want to learn how to be Orthodox, like go to liturgy, especially if you can find one in your language where you can understand it. So, and then when they had classes to catechize people in the church, like I attended those, and I would drop in, and I would bug the priest and listen to podcasts and YouTube videos and read books and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was wondering if when you got into Jordan Peterson, if Orthodox content started appearing on your YouTube recommended video list.
No, this is a little bit before like the popularity of Jonathan Pageau.
Mm-hmm.
Like Peterson came first, and then Pageau came a little bit after. So until I went to that monastery, I never really encountered much Orthodoxy at all. One of the catalysts for me in discovering like the wider world of online Orthodoxy, and especially ancient faith radio, was when I decided to leave San Francisco, because I wanted a wife, I wanted a family, and everyone that I knew in San Francisco was like poly or bi, and it didn't seem like dating was going so well there. Maybe if I had run into like a nice Christian woman in Berkeley, I wouldn't have left, but it didn't seem to be in the cards. So I set out on a road trip to explore the United States and find a new place to live. My family lived in North Carolina, so I figured that would be an endpoint, and I could like stop along the way. And that was also during my first Lent. So I stopped back in Santa Fe, went to the monastery right before Lent, and I was at the parish there. And I started feeling that like I wanted to be baptized. I started just like having a strong feeling during the great entrance, when the gifts are processed around, of just like longing. There was one time at the Santa Fe church, Holy Trinity, they used to have a lovely priest who just retired there, Father John. And as he was doing the great entrance, I was just weeping because I wanted to take part in the gifts with everyone else. And so when I got to Austin was kind of the next stop. I decided to stay put for a while, so I could go through my first Holy Week with people that knew me, at least for a couple of weeks. And I was talking to the priest there and about being baptized, and he told me to talk to the priest back in Berkeley that knew me. And the priest in Berkeley, he gave me podcasts to listen to as I was driving around to catechize me. It was from this show called Our Life in Christ, which is a very old radio show that was originally on a Protestant or a Christian radio station. It was like the only Orthodox show, and it dealt with the very basics of Orthodoxy. And now it's a podcast on ancient faith radio. So that was kind of, that got me starting to listen to a lot of Orthodox podcasts and content, starting with what my priest had given me. And then that was my catechism. And then ultimately I was baptized in Austin at that church there.
So I'd love to get your perspective on something that really interests me. It's very general, so I think whatever you have to say is going to be interesting and specific to you, because part of what brings us into Orthodoxy, and it's this recurring theme that I've noticed, not just with my guests, but listening to other conversion stories, is this deep longing for truth and the truth about reality. And so we go through all these different stages looking for this. And I know for myself, I was actually more, looking back, of course, at the time I wouldn't have admitted this, but looking back, I was actually more interested in feeling good and, discovering these paths and practices and methods that were spiritual, but actually were only making me feel like, giving me a sense of pride, actually. Like the thing that now as a Christian, I'm working to get rid of it. These were the things that were actually creating pride in myself. So spiritual pride and this feeling like I knew more than other people because I had experienced these realms on ayahuasca, and I was given all this spiritual information and healing and all these things that like everyday people don't have because they didn't go through these experiences. I'm still repenting for this, obviously, but did you feel like any of the psychedelics and things you did were doing that, or do you really feel like step by step it was just leading you to Christ and truth? I don't know if that makes sense, because I know ultimately I was searching for our Lord and the Logos and the truth of reality, which is Jesus Christ. But like I said before, it took 30 years. And you had mentioned earlier you were chasing peak experiences. And I think I was doing that too. And I think a lot of my guests were also doing that. So can you just share anything that comes up for you when I talk about that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting line of discussion, because I think if you talk to most Orthodox, they're going, especially ones that haven't experimented with psychedelics, they'll tell you it's all bad. It's just opening yourself to the demonic realms, and there's nothing good to be found there. And if you speak to, I don't think that's all the way true. Like I think there is some good in the psychedelic world, especially in how it opens up the heart, and it gets people back in touch with, thinking. Like there is this demon of capitalism that surrounds us. That the way it works is by killing the heart, so you never even think to ask the questions of the heart, and so especially psilocybin, I think, can really get people to remember in a sort of childlike way that love is what matters, that that nature is beautiful, that to delight in their senses and being alive, and that can open people up to Christianity, because God wants you to have an open heart and to delight in existence that He has made, and in the ways that it is good. So there is a way that I think psychedelics can be cathartic and beneficial, and we see this in scientific studies where it cures people's depression. I think one of the ways in which it can cure people's depression is by getting their heart to go from 0% open to like 30% open. It's like an incredibly much better world to be in. But when you talk about pride, I definitely think that there's a way in which it can become a dead end to pursue psychedelics. And if you look at people who are big names in the space, in Eastern religion or in psychedelics, it tends to be a lot about these cults of personality. And it's not pointing beyond the person to the transcendent goodness. A lot of times it stops in sort of worshiping a person. One of the groups I was involved in the Bay Area turned into an abusive cult. If you look at this documentary, Wild Wild Country, has to do with Hinduism more than it does psychedelics, but people there were on psychedelics too. But this guy, Bhagwan Rajneesh, later known as Osho, totally, abusive, prideful personality. Yeah. Like this is the fruit of the tree of, in my mind, Hinduism and psychedelics. It's like it's used by people that have a talent for communication to aggrandize themselves. And because people their followers put themselves into these vulnerable emotional states, they're ready to latch on to these personalities. There isn't this humility is only really a virtue in Christianity. I don't know of any other religion that holds humility as a value, Even I can't even think. I don't think it's not very much even in the Old Testament is humility seen as a value, other than like following God's the law of God and the will of God. But Christ really shows us the archetype of the humble king, and that's unique to Christianity. A Hindu wants to be powerful. He wants to be like Krishna, who has no humility about him. He's a superhero. Like that's sort of the highest archetype of a Hindu is like he wants to be a superhero like Krishna. But that humility keeps us from going off the rails. Like the church is always the representative of Christ on the earth, and no individual member of the church is bigger than the church. And if a priest develops some amount of fame because he is a very holy man, it's understood that it's proper that he downplays that and that he doesn't embrace that, and that he stays humble. And if people are coming and flocking to see him, it's in spite of his humility, and not because you're supposed to kind of like not embrace the fame or not seek it. And it's a trial. It's understood to be a trial. Like a lot of our saints were very isolated and humble people that weren't very well known in their lifetime.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of dangers in psychedelics. If you're too good at it, it's very bad for you. If you're too good at navigating that world and like speaking from it, like best case scenario, you become someone like who was that DMT guy that did all the DMT? He talks about machine elves all the time. Terrence McKenna.
Oh, Terrence McKenna, yeah.
Or who's the LSD guy from Harvard? I forgot his name. Leary.
Oh,
Timothy
yeah.
Leary.
Timothy Leary and Ram Dass.
You can make yourself a little cult of personality, or Alex Gray's. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but at the end of the day, you're looking around, you're facing death, and you're like a king of a little kingdom. Maybe you got the attention and praise of people in this life, but that's temporary. It's going away. And now what?
Mm-hmm. And then specifically orthodoxy, one thing I really love is, and that I would love for you to comment on, is the idea of the body of the church, and that we're the body of Christ as we worship together in the liturgy and as a community. There's a lot of New Age to Jesus people right now that don't go to church. They despise religion. They have a lot of religious trauma. Maybe they only know about Catholicism and Protestantism, and so there's a big group of ladies on Instagram that have huge followings, and they reject any form of church worship and tradition. And for me, I mean, before I found orthodoxy and I was just sitting in my room reading my Bible and praying, and I didn't have a community, that was closer to New Ageism than by far than what I'm doing now, which is I'm a catechumen at my church and being welcomed into a community there. And so I just wonder what your thoughts are as far as, because a lot of them will say even that orthodoxy is not biblical, Bible alone. And so all you need is your relationship with God and Jesus, and you don't need to be part of a church. Yet the Bible continuously talks, or the New Testament is talking about the church and the body of Christ. So just wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people in America have very Protestant assumptions in how they view the world. And they think by default in a very individualistic way about what truth is and what their journey is. But I don't know that I can convince someone that thinks that way. I've tried to convince some of my smart Protestant friends that they should check out orthodoxy and failed. I don't know that I can convince anyone if they're dedicated that way. What I can say is, sort of the classic Orthodox line is come and see. Like for me, I didn't have commitments to a Protestant way of viewing the world. By default, I was pretty independent. But when I encountered Orthodoxy, I just encountered something very real and very old and very majestic, and something ultimately that I thought had a better grasp of the truth than I did. And I liked that I could lean on, 2 millennia of Orthodox saints and theologians and learn and be part of their journey towards God. And I could lean on them and let them carry me a little bit. And I didn't have to figure out everything for myself. And when I started thinking about, Christianity through Jordan Peterson, and like started being interested, and also through Rene Girard a lot, another philosopher. And I started being interested in Christianity as a way of approaching truth. I wanted the realest form of Christianity there was. And to me, like being a historically aware guy, I was always a big history buff. I'm like, this Orthodoxy is what Christianity is, the mainstream of Christianity. Like if you were to take the mainstream from all of Christian history, like if you look at America today, it's weird and fringe and crazy, right? And it has all this, pageantry and everything. It's completely weird to the American mind. But if you took all the Christians who have ever lived and you had them like, and you saw like, what's the mainstream here? It's a liturgical church that has art, that is focused around the Eucharist, and the other sacraments. It's just Orthodoxy. Like it's the realist expression of Christianity, if you're historically aware. And like if you went to a saint, the saints of the past, who every branch of Christianity that would recognize as a great theologian, like Saint Basil or Saint John Chrysostom or Athanasius, these are Orthodox bishops. Like, the great men of the past in Christianity are Orthodox bishops. But when I encounter this thing, it's a living thing. Like that church that Athanasius was a part of, or that Saint Basil was a part of, it still exists, and it has this powerful reality to it. Like when you encounter it, it's like nothing else. It is not like, I had a hard time with Protestantism because I'm usually the smartest guy in the room, and I can't have like just a smart guy get up on stage and tell me what to think and believe, because I'm smarter than him. It's like I should be doing that, right? But when I encounter Orthodoxy, I encounter something larger and more grand than any individual human. It's not about the priest or the preacher on stage, because that priest is drawing from an ancient tradition. It's still alive. It's alive. Like in America, where everything's fake and new and plain and boring, like there's this thing that's alive and ancient, and it has this greater reality. It feels more real than anything else in the American landscape, because it predates it by 10 times the length, the age of America. And it's there. You can just go experience it, and you can, like, your church, your local church might be small and in a shopping mall, or it might be grand. Like my church in Austin is grand and beautiful. It really brings you back to how churches must be on the European continent. Either way, like you're participating, the life of the church, the liturgy, the hymns, they're part of this ancient tradition, and you get a taste of that power, which is really nowhere else. So I mean, that's what I would say to someone that's like avoiding being part of something. It's like you will get so much further if you can listen to the voices of all these holy men of the past. And there's just something more real here than you'll ever invent on your own. Like, no. Don't set yourself up for the task of inventing, the community of the people of God by yourself, because it exists already, and that should be a relief.
Yeah. And when I started reading the commentary in my Orthodox study Bible, it was such a relief. Like, oh, okay, because I had already read the Gospels, but then when I read them in the Orthodox Study Bible, now I got to have the 2,000 years of understanding to explain it to me. I'm so glad that I have an Orthodox Study Bible, because I don't want to make up my own interpretation of Scripture.
Yeah.
That's new agey to me to do something like that, because what am I going to do? I'm going to make up interpretation that feeds some kind of something in me. It's not about me.
Well, I really do wanted to make my own interpretation of Scripture, but I just I think like that's like the way that I'm broken. Like I'm very arrogant. I've always wanted to be the biggest guy in the world that everyone listens to. But I think as I got older, I just recognized like my own limitations. Like I'm not going to do as good of a job as like Saint Basil, or or just to pick a guy that I like, but or Saint Chrysostom, who just lived it and breathed it, and like read and wrote in the language of the Bible. Like I'm not gonna do better. And if I do come up with my own interpretation, I'm just misleading people. Like pity the person who follows me.
Right. Yeah. So you had mentioned His Life is Mine. I wondered if there are any other books that you would recommend.
Sure. I mean, His Life is Mine is a great book, especially if you have a mystical sensibility about you. If you spend some time as a Buddhist, then I can't recommend that one enough. Saint Sophrony is a singular voice. It reads like a hybrid between a work of theology and a journal. So if you've ever wondered, like, what is a monk experiencing? One of these guys that rejects the world to pray. It seems like crazy, right? It's such a demonstration of skin in the game. And you're like, those guys, like, what's going on in their heads? Where they gave up like sex and like money and like all these things that we spend all our time chasing to like for nothing. Like, what's going on in their head? His Life is Mine kind of gets you at that interiority of what a Orthodox mystic is like, in a way that I don't know of really anyone else that quite does that. There are some other books that I really enjoyed along the way. A lot of modern saints, I would say Saint Porphyrios there's a book of his sayings called Wounded by Love. That's a great one. And what other books would I say? I really enjoyed, there's a fictional book about a made up Orthodox saint in the Russian Middle Ages called Laurus, Laurus, by Eugene Vodolaskin. That one will get you excited to be a pilgrim and go travel and go on a pilgrimage, as well as I read The Way of the Pilgrim and Laurus kind of back to back. The Way of the Pilgrim is a little bit more of a devotional book, like straight up, but it's also the story of a pilgrim. And then Laurus is a little bit more of a modern, fictionalized story of a saint. Both are excellent. Also Elder, I think it's Elder Thaddeus has a book called Our Thoughts Determine Our Lives that I read with my group at church. That was a good one. Those are good for beginners. And then I like to dive in. I was very drawn. I have a bit of a philosophical bent, and I read The Mystical Theology of the Eastern Church by
Losky, I think.
Yeah, Losky. I read Losky right away, which I don't recommend for everyone. But if you're a philosopher or something, then
I have that book. It's a little too advanced for me.
I liked it a lot, but a lot went over my head. But we went over it in my church reading group too after that, and like the second time through, like with my priest, I got more out of it.
Oh, I would love to read it that way.
Yeah, it was nice. It took us a long time to get through. And then I've been taking some courses lately, although haven't been passing them, but I'm not so good at remote courses, but someday maybe I'll pass them through the Antiochian House of Studies. And one of the things from that I've gotten a lot out of is they have a liturgical theology class. So it explains the meaning of the liturgy, a lot of the reading there, in the history of the liturgy. And it's made me appreciate liturgy more than I already did. Wow. So the readings there and the lectures there have also been very edifying for me, even though I haven't kept up with the work enough to get a C yet. But maybe next time through.
That sounds great. I'm reading the Eucharist right now.
Oh, who wrote that?
Alexander Schmemann.
Okay.
I have it over here, but yeah, it's actually great for a beginner. It's not too over my head. So,
and also I'm a huge podcast guy. Like through a lot of my education came in podcasts. Like I listened to a lot of Hopko. He has a podcast.
I love him. Yeah, he's so good. I was listening to him this morning, actually.
And I really loved, a guy that was a big influence on me coming into Orthodoxy was Father Seraphim Aldea. And in fact, if you look at my channel on YouTube, I have playlists where I've clipped out, where I've either bookmarked his lectures that he gave when he was raising money to start a monastery in the Scottish Islands, or I've clipped out little pieces of those talks to kind of make it more digestible. Because I just thought he was just so quotable, such a quotable young monk, getting a little less young nowadays. But he was a Sophrony scholar too. Like he spent a lot of time reading and studying Saint Sophrony of Essex, which is probably why he spoke to me so strongly. That was another guy that I really liked. I really like Protecting Veil YouTube channel. They have all these like short little interviews with various Orthodox figures, and they do a really great job. Just spent quite a bit of time around a lot of these online resources as well.
Well, tell us about your channel or any projects you're working on.
Sure. I mean, on my channel, I've been very interested in telling the story of people that have come to faith as an adult, kind of swimming against the stream of this great apostasy of the modern age, where Nietzsche said God is dead, and then he was sort of telling the reality of something that was already happening at that point, and that we've seen in the last couple hundred years of people fleeing religion. But now there's like these people coming back, and I think that's hopeful and good. And I want to tell their story, and I want to connect with people who are coming to religion. I haven't been able to find too many Orthodox come speak, or any actually so far. So that's something. If you want to come and be interviewed by me on my channel about your journey into the faith, I'd be happy to do that. I would love to have an Orthodox person or two on. And then my channel, I had some other content on there earlier, just exploring some more of the having conversations with people that I thought had interesting perspectives on human life. I don't know where it's going to go in the future, but right now I'm interested in the conversion story realm, which is why I wanted to be on your podcast, because like we're interested in the same things.
Yeah. And thank you. It's an honor to be invited. I made a decision to wait until I'm baptized to do any more interviews. And so once I'm baptized, I would love to be a guest on your show. Thank you.
That's great. It's really a hard thing for people to balance being excited about their faith and deciding like when to talk, like what's their level of expertise. And I think it's important to be humble and patient. My flaw is that I'm overconfident and like love to put myself out there. But I did talk to my priest about this, where when I started podcasting and talking about religion, I asked him, like, is it okay that I do this? And we talked about it and like my motivation for it. And he thought it'd be okay. And I'd encourage people just to take it seriously, like the possible downsides of being an amateur Orthodox online, and talk to your priest about it. Don't solo everything. You don't have to make all your I mean, ultimately, like you do make decisions for yourself, but we're part of a body, right? And be responsible to that.
Yeah.
Like if you run into something that you're not sure about, or you have mixed feelings about, like, do talk it over, have a spiritual father and talk it over with them. One thing I am concerned about is you talked earlier about like these Christians that don't want to be part of any sort of organized body. But you find people sometimes treating orthodoxy that way, where they're interested in orthodoxy and they encounter online Orthodox communities, but they don't have an in-life Orthodox community. Mm-hmm. That's a fine place to start. But that's not how we do orthodoxy.
Yeah.
Like you have to have a spiritual father. You have to be accountable to people. You have to be in relationship with people in real life, preferably, if you can at all. If you can't, well, you do what you can. But that's like the paradigm. That's how you live an Orthodox life.
Yes,
so I appreciate you taking the humility and like not and saying you're not going to do any interviews until after you're baptized, and I'd be happy to have you on after that.
Well, and I have done some interviews, but recently decided it's just going to be more fun to actually be baptized. And I actually really do not like having any attention on myself, which might be hard to believe because I have a YouTube channel, but this is why they're all interviews. I've done a couple channel updates where it's just me talking, but I usually end up just keeping those up for a week or two just to talk about who's, like my upcoming guests and anything I'm working on. But I do not teach orthodoxy. I do not teach theology. I really just have this channel to hopefully lead people to divine liturgy. That's my ultimate goal. Or at least if someone hasn't even read the Bible yet, I hope that my show will encourage people to either read the Gospels, start there, or go to a parish bookstore and ask the person working there what would be a good book to start with, just to inspire people. And then as far as my audience who are already Orthodox, I get so many wonderful comments that that just like help me keep going with this project. And I've just gotten so much support. So I think these stories, like you said, these stories of conversion later in life, I think they can inspire people really at any level of interest in orthodoxy. And my godmother has been Orthodox for most of her life, and she watches my show and she loves the stories from the guests. I mean, I just think that there are little pieces in each one of my videos that my guests share something that hopefully is heartwarming, heart-opening, and inspiring. So,
and it's a wonderful thing to do, and I very much appreciate the platform to tell my story. As someone, it's a great gift to give to someone, like the ability to tell their story. And I find, like, we're not all so different. Like, people have similarities with each other, and you can say something that really resonates.
Yeah.
When do you have like a date or a plan for when you're going to take the plunge?
It's up to my priest and God. Okay. And I don't know. There are some people who have been catechumens in my church for a year or two, like over a year and a half, sometimes closer to 2. So if that's me, then I accept that. I don't know. I hope it's within this year. I'm pretty sure it will be in 2022, but other than that, I can't say.
Okay. Yeah, it's good. I think it's good to take your time and to make those decisions, not be in too much of a rush.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful that I did. For me, Orthodoxy has felt like a bit of a homecoming, in that, like, I grew up with all these Christian stories, but it obviously wasn't the right thing. Like, it felt broken and wrong. And then when I came to Orthodoxy, like, all that time I spent learning the Christian stories, suddenly it became valuable again. Sort of like in this phase of my life, after 18 years away, suddenly, like, that perspective has become valuable. But I think for me, as I came into the faith, like, learning to be Christian after having not been Christian for 18 years was pretty hard. And I was very grateful to the to like my childhood education, but as far as like learning how to say no to any sort of any sort of desire or temptation, and limiting myself, or being humble at all, like that was hard for me. And even it took a while to understand like why not to sin. Like now I sort of have this intuitive understanding, after 3 years of being baptized, of like, okay, like sin will lead me down a bad path, but it's not always obvious how that works either. And I wasn't convinced of it right away. And it took just time and being in relation to the church to start to understand things. And a lot of what I think I understand now, that I certainly have a better understanding of now than I did before, isn't necessarily things I could explain in words either. And if I could explain them in words, like you might not get them. Like I think you do have to be around it and immersed in it, and see how to be Orthodox rather than hear how to be Orthodox in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a lifestyle. It's such a way of living in a way that's bringing us closer to God every day. Whereas, and this kind of goes back to what I said earlier about some of the other types of Christians, they believe they're once saved, always saved. And we struggle daily with our passions. We pray, we make every day another attempt to repent and ask the Lord for his grace. And that's hard, it's challenging, and it takes a lot of self-responsibility. And then again, going back to why we need the body of the church community to hold us accountable. It's hard, People
don't like being accountable, but
right.
You make a lot more progress if you are.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I would say, like the earlier phase of me coming to Orthodoxy, like the first couple of years was relatively easy and like joyful. It was like just constant learning and slowly shaping my heart to want the right things, and to some things were easier than others, but like it was just slowly becoming a Christian. And then my next phase is hard. It's now that I'm engaged, it's like now learning to do that with someone else. It's like a whole nother thing. It's like in retrospect, it's like very easy to be just me working on myself.
Yeah.
But now like learning how to build a godly relationship, it's like there's like two people with different desires and predilections, and like what they're into and what parts of the Christian life that is their favorite, and like what times we wake up and all that. Like we're learning how to do it together. It's like a whole nother thing.
Oh my gosh, that will be such a wonderful topic to have both of you back on the show, maybe in the springtime, or I don't know, like in a couple months. I'd love to do an entire show just on that.
Well, give us, we're kind of new to it. So give us maybe
okay,
after
when you're ready,
married.
when you're ready.
Maybe after we're married, and then give us a couple months after that.
Okay.
Maybe that'd be a good time.
Well, Jacob, any last words for the audience before we say goodbye?
Last words. I would say that if you are a spiritual explorer and you want to, experience the most real reality and know what's really out there, then do so boldly and fully, and don't leave any corners unturned. In that, I think for a lot of people, they're like, well, Christianity doesn't have anything to offer. I'm going to explore everything except for Christianity.
Yeah.
I'm like, just take it seriously. Like, look under that rock. Come into that church door. Like there's something here. And it's good. And you should check it out. And judge a tree by the fruit it bears. That's all I got to say.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being my guest today. This has been a lot of fun, Jacob.
Thank you for having me, Allison.
And to my audience, thank you all so much for your support. Again, this is my 29th episode, and I love the comments. And again, if you want to share my podcast, it's now available on Spotify. I do not get any ads, any ad revenue at this time. So if you want to support my work, there's a PayPal link below in the description. And if you're interested in coaching with me, if you're a woman on the Christian path and you just need some support with femininity, relationships, love, creativity, or you're thinking of starting an online business, I can help you with the online marketing for that as well. You can send me a message on Instagram at @adevotionalheart. And until next time, I wish you all well and God bless all of you and your families. Bye.